What's your rank? They letting junior officers run this event now?
You'll find out soon enough.
Commander Brooks. It's an honor.
The grand ballroom of the Liberty Heritage Hotel had hosted presidents, decorated veterans, astronauts, and world-famous philanthropists. But on this crisp autumn evening, it was filled with something even more remarkable. Hundreds of men and women who had dedicated their lives to serving others. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm golden glow across polished marble floors, while a military orchestra quietly played patriotic melodies near the stage. Officers in formal dress uniforms greeted old friends with firm handshakes. Families proudly adjusted medals on their loved ones' jackets, and journalists hurried from table to table searching for the night's biggest story. Every year, the National Heroes Foundation held this gala to honor acts of extraordinary leadership, courage, and service. Most people came expecting speeches and awards. None of them knew they were about to witness a moment that would be remembered for decades. Chief Petty Officer Ethan Walker, a legendary Navy SEAL instructor, entered the ballroom surrounded by several younger SEALs who looked up to him with enormous respect. Ethan had spent nearly 20 years in the military. He had survived dangerous deployments, trained elite operators, and earned a reputation as someone who could remain calm under pressure no matter the situation. His confidence inspired everyone around him, but years of success had quietly planted another habit inside him. He often believed he could judge a person's experience within seconds of meeting them. He rarely meant to offend anyone. His sharp humor and playful teasing had become part of his personality, and most people laughed along with him. Tonight, however, that habit was about to teach him the most humbling lesson of his life. As Ethan walked through the ballroom, photographers stopped him for pictures while veterans thanked him for his service. He smiled politely, shook countless hands, and accepted every compliment with quiet confidence. His teammates followed closely behind, joking with one another as they searched for their assigned table. Then Ethan noticed a woman standing near the registration desk, helping volunteers organize guest lists. She appeared to be in her late 30s, wearing a perfectly pressed dark blue military dress uniform. Unlike many officers in the room, she wore only a modest collection of ribbons above her pocket. There were no flashy decorations or oversized displays of achievement. Her dark hair was neatly tied into a professional bun, and her calm expression never changed despite the constant stream of guests asking questions. She greeted every person with genuine kindness, whether they were a four-star general or a nervous teenage volunteer attending the event with their veteran parent. One elderly veteran accidentally dropped his walking stick. Before anyone else noticed, the woman gently picked it up, smiled warmly, and helped him to his seat. A young volunteer became overwhelmed after misplacing several guest badges. Instead of becoming frustrated, she quietly helped reorganize the entire registration table while reassuring the nervous teenager that everything would be all right. Ethan watched for a moment. "Looks like she's running the whole event." One of the younger SEALs laughed. "Probably the logistics officer," another guessed. Ethan smiled. "Or someone's assistant trying to keep everyone organized." The group chuckled. None of them noticed several senior officers respectfully nodding toward the woman as they passed. A few minutes later, Ethan's group reached the registration desk. The woman greeted them with a friendly smile. "Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to the National Heroes Foundation Gala." She handed Ethan his seating card. "Your table is number 12. Dinner will begin in approximately 20 minutes. Her voice was calm, confident, and professional. Ethan glanced briefly at her uniform. Then, with a playful grin, he asked loudly enough for several nearby guests to hear. "So, what's your rank? They letting lieutenants organize the whole gala these days." Several people nearby laughed politely. One of Ethan's teammates smirked. Another quietly looked away, sensing the comment might not have landed well. The woman simply smiled. "My rank isn't important tonight." Ethan laughed. "Come on." He folded his arms. "I've spent enough years around uniforms. I like guessing ranks. She tilted her head slightly. And what do you think? Ethan studied her for a second. I'm guessing Lieutenant Commander. Maybe Commander if you've been lucky. The volunteers exchanged nervous glances. The woman simply nodded. Interesting guess. She handed the final seating card to one of the younger SEALs. I hope you enjoy the evening. Without another word, she returned to helping an elderly couple find their table. Ethan shrugged. Nice woman. His teammates laughed. Before they could walk away, the ballroom doors slowly opened. Every conversation seemed to fade. For distinguished generals entered together. Each had spent decades serving their country. Each was widely respected throughout the military. Photographers rushed forward, camera flashes filling the room. Most guests expected the generals to head directly toward the stage. Instead, all four looked across the ballroom. They immediately changed direction, walking past television crews, past politicians, past celebrity guests, straight toward the woman at the registration desk. The ballroom slowly fell silent. Ethan watched with mild curiosity. One of the generals smiled warmly as he approached. The woman immediately stood perfectly at attention. Without hesitation, all four generals raised crisp military salutes. The room froze. Hundreds of guests watched in complete silence. The woman returned each salute with flawless precision. Then the senior-most general spoke. Commander Maya Brooks. His smile carried genuine admiration. It's wonderful to see you again. The honor is mine, sir. Another general stepped forward. We couldn't begin tonight without greeting the woman who made this program possible. Several guests exchanged confused looks. Ethan's confident smile slowly disappeared. Commander? He looked again at her modest ribbons. Nothing about her appearance suggested someone capable of commanding the respect of four generals. One of his teammates quietly whispered, Chief, I know. Something didn't add up. A retired admiral nearby smiled at Ethan. You look surprised. Ethan nodded honestly. I've never seen four generals salute a commander before greeting each other. The admiral chuckled. That's because you haven't met Commander Maya Brooks. Before Ethan could ask another question, another military officer approached Maya, carrying an old leather folder. Ma'am, he said respectfully. The archive photographs arrived. She thanked him and carefully opened the folder. A black and white photograph slipped onto the marble floor. Ethan instinctively bent down to pick it up. The moment he looked at it, his expression changed. The photograph showed 6 young soldiers standing together decades earlier. 5 were uniforms. 1 wore civilian clothes. In the center stood a much younger Maya. Beside her stood every one of the 4 generals currently attending the gala. Yet none of them wore stars on their shoulders. Instead, they all appeared to be junior officers. On the back of the photograph, someone had handwritten 6 simple words. She carried us when nobody could. Ethan stared silently. What could that possibly mean? He handed the photograph back. Maya smiled politely. Thank you. Their eyes met for just a second. There was no pride in hers. Only humility. She carefully placed the photograph back into the folder. Just then, the ballroom lights dimmed. The master of ceremonies stepped onto the stage. Ladies and gentlemen. His voice echoed throughout the hall. Tonight's highest honor recognizes a lifetime of service that changed thousands of lives. A spotlight slowly swept across the audience. It stopped, directly on Commander Maya Brooks. The entire ballroom rose to its feet. A standing ovation thundered through the hall. Ethan remained standing with everyone else, but his mind raced with questions. Who was Commander Maya Brooks? Why did 4 generals treat her like family? What had happened in the photograph taken so many years ago? And why did the nation's highest military leaders believe the quiet woman he had jokingly underestimated deserved the greatest honor of the evening? As Maya slowly walked toward the stage, Ethan realized something that unsettled him more than any battlefield ever had. For the first time in his career, he had completely misjudged someone. And before the night was over, he would discover that the strongest leaders are often the ones who never feel the need to prove their strength. The applause echoed through the grand ballroom long after Commander Maya Brooks reached the stage. It wasn't the polite applause given to a respected officer. It was something deeper. Veterans stood with tears in their eyes. Young cadets watched with admiration. Retired officers who had once commanded thousands of troops stood at attention as though they were once again young lieutenants reporting for duty. Ethan Walker remained frozen beside his table. He had spent 2 decades serving beside extraordinary men and women, yet he had never witnessed 4 generals rise together to honor a single commander. His joke from only minutes earlier replayed over and over in his mind, each memory growing heavier than the last. The master of ceremonies waited until the applause softened before speaking. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we celebrate someone who has spent her entire career refusing recognition. In fact, convincing Commander Brooks to attend this evening required nearly 6 months. The audience laughed warmly. Maya smiled awkwardly. I only agreed, she admitted into the microphone, because General Harris threatened to send a helicopter to my office. The ballroom erupted with laughter. General Harris laughed the loudest. I wasn't joking, he called from his table. The humor quickly gave way to silence as the master of ceremonies continued. Many people know Commander Brooks as a brilliant strategist, mentor, and leader. Very few know the story that began 22 years ago. A large screen behind the stage flickered to life. An old photograph appeared. It was the same photograph Ethan had picked up from the floor. 6 young officers stood together outside a flood-damaged village. Their uniforms were covered with mud. They looked exhausted, but every one of them was smiling. The audience watched quietly. 22 years ago, the presenter said, a devastating hurricane destroyed several coastal communities during a multinational humanitarian relief mission. Thousands of families were stranded. Roads had disappeared beneath floodwaters. Communication systems had collapsed. The next photograph appeared. Collapsed bridges. Flooded streets. Children waiting on rooftops. The ballroom became completely silent. Maya Brooks was only 27 years old. Ethan frowned. 27. One of the retired admirals sitting beside him nodded. She was the youngest planning officer on the operation. The presentation continued. During the second day of the mission, the command center lost all communications with 4 rescue teams after severe flooding destroyed every bridge leading into the valley. The screen displayed another image. For young officers studying a soaked paper map, Ethan immediately recognized them. The same 4 men who were now generals. General Harris, General Collins, General Pierce, General Dalton. The presenter continued. They volunteered to enter the valley. General Harris lowered his head. But we made one mistake, he said quietly from his seat. We believed we knew the terrain. Another image appeared. Aerial photographs of landslides blocking roads. The presenter nodded. They became trapped. A heavy silence settled over the ballroom. No helicopters could fly because of the storm. No rescue vehicles could reach them. For nearly 48 hours. There was no contact. Ethan leaned forward. What happened? The retired admiral smiled. Commander Brooks happened. The screen showed Maya studying weather maps beneath emergency lights. While senior leaders debated whether a rescue was even possible, Lieutenant Maya Brooks spent 18 straight hours analyzing satellite images, weather reports, and old engineering surveys. General Collins stood unexpectedly. I remember telling her it couldn't be done. He smiled at Maya. I'm very glad she ignored me. Soft laughter spread through the audience. The presenter continued. Lieutenant Brooks discovered an abandoned railway tunnel nearly forgotten by modern maps. The screen zoomed into faded engineering drawings. The tunnel had partially collapsed decades earlier. It was dangerous. It was unstable. But it was the only possible route. General Dalton slowly stood. We told her she couldn't lead the rescue. He smiled. She politely informed us that nobody had ordered her not to. The room laughed again. Ethan couldn't believe what he was hearing. The presenter continued. She assembled 12 volunteers. They entered the tunnel carrying medical supplies, rescue equipment, and enough food for 72 hours. Photographs appeared of exhausted rescue workers emerging from muddy tunnels. They reached the trapped officers. The room remained silent. They evacuated more than 100 civilians before the tunnel finally collapsed behind them. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. General Harris slowly walked onto the stage beside Maya. "I've commanded thousands of soldiers." His voice trembled. "I've met countless heroes." He looked directly at the audience. "But the reason 4 generals salute Commander Brooks," he paused, "is because without her," he looked toward the other 3 generals, "none of us would have lived long enough to become generals." The ballroom erupted into another standing ovation. Ethan felt his throat tighten. His joke now felt painfully small. The presenter smiled. "But Commander Brooks insists that isn't the real story." Maya gently shook her head. "It isn't." She stepped toward the microphone. "People keep telling the rescue story." She smiled warmly. "But they forget why we went." The screen changed again. Instead of soldiers, children appeared. Families, doctors, teachers, entire villages smiling beside rebuilt schools. Those communities weren't waiting for medals. They were waiting for hope. She continued, "Leadership isn't about being the strongest person in the room. It's about making sure the people beside you never lose hope." Every person listened in complete silence. Maya looked toward the generals. "They've spent 20 years thanking me." She smiled. "But the truth is, they spent 20 years honoring the promise we all made together." General Pierce nodded. "What promise?" Maya answered softly. "That if any one of us ever succeeded, we would spend the rest of our lives lifting someone else." The ballroom fell silent again. Then Ethan noticed something unexpected. None of the generals were wearing the evening's highest service medal. Instead, each one quietly removed it from their jacket. General Harris stepped forward first. He carefully pinned his medal onto Maya's uniform. General Collins followed. Then General Dalton. Then General Pierce. The audience gasped. Decorated officers rarely removed medals they had earned through decades of service. Yet all 4 did so without hesitation. General Harris smiled. "We wear these because we survived." He looked at Maya. "You wear them because we survived." Tears filled countless eyes throughout the ballroom. Ethan lowered his head. For the first time in years, he felt genuinely ashamed. Not because he had asked about Maya's rank, but because he had judged her value before learning her story. As the applause continued, one of Ethan's younger teammates quietly whispered, "Chief, I think you owe her an apology." Ethan nodded. "I do." He had no idea that before the evening ended, Commander Maya Brooks would reveal one final secret. A truth she had hidden for more than 20 years, that would leave the entire ballroom speechless and forever change the life of the Navy SEAL who had underestimated her. The standing ovation continued for nearly a full minute before the applause finally settled into respectful silence. Commander Maya Brooks remained standing at the center of the stage, now wearing the 4 medals that each general had personally pinned onto her uniform. She looked almost uncomfortable with the attention. Throughout her career, she had avoided ceremonies, interviews, and public praise, believing that leadership was measured by lives changed rather than headlines written. Yet tonight, there was no escaping the gratitude filling the ballroom. Chief Petty Officer Ethan Walker remained motionless near his table. The joke he had made earlier echoed relentlessly in his mind. He had judged a remarkable leader by the number of ribbons on her uniform instead of the character she carried. He had spent years teaching young SEALs never to underestimate a mission, yet he had underestimated a person within seconds of meeting her. The Master of Ceremonies stepped forward once more. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "everything you've heard tonight is true. But there is one chapter of Commander Brooks' story that has never been shared publicly." The room became completely silent. General Harris looked toward Maya. "Are you certain?" She smiled gently. "It's time." The large screen behind the stage changed again. Instead of military photographs, an image of a small brick house appeared. It looked ordinary. The presenter spoke quietly. 22 years ago, after the rescue mission that saved 4 young officers and more than 100 civilians, Commander Brooks was offered one of the fastest promotions in modern military history. Many guests nodded. Several already knew that part of the story. But she declined. A wave of surprise spread across the ballroom. Ethan frowned. She turned it down? The retired admiral beside him nodded. Twice. The presenter continued. Instead of accepting a prestigious headquarters assignment, she requested permission to establish a mentorship program for the children of fallen service members. Photographs filled the screen. Young boys learning to tie neckties. Teenage girls receiving university scholarships. Families sharing holiday meals. Military widows smiling beside volunteers. Children graduating from school. One picture after another. Hundreds of faces. Then thousands. The presenter smiled. That program began with 12 children. The next image appeared. Today, it had helped more than 8,000 military families. The audience gasped. Many had never heard of it, because Maya had never attached her own name to the project. General Collins stood. Every year, he said, people thanked us for supporting the program. He looked at Maya. They never realized she quietly paid for most of it herself. Another general added, every bonus, every speaking fee, every award payment. She donated almost all of it. The ballroom fell silent once again. Then something unexpected happened. A young man in his early 20s walked onto the stage from the audience. He wore a neatly pressed Air Force uniform. He saluted Maya before speaking. My name is Lieutenant Daniel Moore. His voice trembled. When I was 9 years old, my father was killed while serving overseas. He paused. My mother worked 3 jobs to keep food on our table. He smiled through tears. Every Christmas, anonymous gifts appeared on our doorstep. Another pause. When university seemed impossible, a scholarship arrived. I later discovered it came from Commander Brooks' foundation. He turned toward the audience. I stand here today because someone believed in me before I believed in myself. The room erupted into applause. Before it faded, another voice spoke. Then another. A doctor. A firefighter. A teacher. A police officer. One by one, men and women stood throughout the ballroom. Every one of them had once been a child helped by Maya's program. Within minutes, nearly 50 people stood. Each carried the same message. She changed my life. She gave my family hope. She never wanted credit. Tears filled Ethan's eyes. The greatest achievement of Commander Maya Brooks wasn't saving 4 future generals. It wasn't refusing promotions. It wasn't even creating a program that transformed thousands of lives. It was doing all of it quietly, without expecting recognition. When the applause finally settled, Ethan slowly walked toward the stage. The room watched in complete silence. He stopped a few feet in front of Maya. For several seconds, he couldn't find the words. Finally, he stood perfectly at attention. Then, before the entire ballroom, the legendary Navy SEAL rendered a crisp military salute. I owe you an apology, Commander. His voice was steady but filled with emotion. I judged your rank. He shook his head. When I should have recognized your character. Maya returned the salute. There is nothing to apologize for. Ethan looked surprised. I made a joke. She smiled kindly. And then you listened. The room remained silent. That's what matters. She continued. Good leaders don't pretend they're always right. They have the courage to learn when they're wrong. Those simple words struck Ethan more deeply than any medal ever could. General Harris stepped forward. Chief Walker, would you do us the honor? Ethan looked confused. General Harris handed him a small wooden presentation box. Inside rested the evening's highest civilian award for leadership. The board voted unanimously. General Harris smiled. Commander Brooks asked that someone else receive this tonight. Ethan looked at Maya. You turned it down? She nodded. There are many people who deserve recognition, but not me. General Collins laughed. She has been refusing awards for 20 years. Maya gently closed the presentation box and handed it back. Use the funding instead. She smiled. There are still children waiting for scholarships. The ballroom exploded into applause louder than ever before. No speech could have inspired the crowd more than that single sentence. Instead of accepting another medal, she chose to help another child. Months later, newspapers across the country published the remarkable story of the quiet commander who had inspired 4 generals to salute her before anyone else. Yet Maya declined every television interview. She returned to her office on Monday morning exactly as she always had, mentoring young officers, visiting military families, and answering emails from students whose dreams she continued to support. As for Ethan Walker, the evening changed him forever. Back at the SEAL Training Center, he introduced a new tradition. On the first day of every training class, he placed a blank name tag on a table and asked every trainee a simple question. What can you tell me about the person this belongs to? The recruits usually answered, nothing. Ethan smiled. Exactly. Never decide someone's worth before you've learned their story. He then shared the lesson he had learned from Commander Maya Brooks. Years later, many of those recruits would repeat those same words to the next generation of leaders. On the anniversary of the gala, the National Heroes Foundation invited Maya back once more. This time she reluctantly accepted, but only after making one condition. No speeches about me, she said. Instead, every child who had received help through her program was invited onto the stage. More than 300 young men and women filled the auditorium. Doctors, teachers, engineers, nurses, pilots, soldiers, scientists, business owners. Each one represented a life changed by a single act of quiet leadership. The 4 generals rose to their feet first, then Ethan, then every veteran in the room. Soon, the entire audience stood together in a silent tribute, not because Commander Maya Brooks had asked for recognition, but because genuine leadership had earned it. As the applause echoed through the hall, Maya looked across the crowd and smiled softly. She knew medals would eventually tarnish, uniforms would one day be folded away, and titles would be forgotten. But kindness, humility, and the decision to lift others instead of yourself could outlive every award. That evening, everyone left with the same unforgettable lesson. The strongest leaders are rarely the loudest. The greatest heroes seldom introduce themselves, and true respect is never demanded. It is quietly earned through a lifetime of serving others.